I didn't knock on that door because I wanted to. I knocked because it was the only one left. The rain soaked through my jacket in seconds, cold and heavy, dripping down my neck as I clutched my son tighter against my chest. His small fingers twisted into my shirt, his breath uneven, scared in a way no 5-year-old should ever be. "Mom, are we safe?" he whispered, his voice barely louder than the storm. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My eyes stayed locked on the door in front of me, tall, black, polished like something out of a place I didn't belong. I raised my hand again and knocked harder this time, the sound echoing into the silence behind it. 1 second, 2, 3. The world felt like it was holding its breath with me. Then the door opened, slowly, and everything inside me went still. He stood there like he had stepped out of a different world entirely. Tall, perfectly put together. Dark suit, crisp white shirt, not a single detail out of place. Even in the dim light spilling from behind him, I could see it, the control in his posture, the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to speak to be understood. His eyes found mine instantly. Cold, sharp, observing. Not surprised, not concerned, just aware. I swallowed hard, my voice catching in my throat before I forced it out. "Please, I just need a place to stay for a few minutes." Just until. I stopped myself. I didn't know how to explain the kind of fear that had been chasing me for the last hour. The kind that didn't stop when you locked a door. His gaze dropped briefly to my hands. They were shaking. Then to my son, clinging to me like I was the only thing keeping him grounded. Something shifted. Not much. Just enough that I noticed. He stepped aside. "Come in." 2 words. Calm. Final. I hesitated. Every instinct I had told me this was a mistake. That nothing about this man was safe. But the sound of a car slowing somewhere behind me made the decision for me. I stepped inside. The door closed behind us with a quiet click that felt louder than thunder. I turned instinctively, my hand reaching for the handle, but it didn't move. Locked. Too fast. Too easy. My heart skipped. When I turned back, he was already watching me again. Closer now. Not touching. Just there. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice low, controlled, like he was stating a fact, not a warning. My chest tightened. "I didn't know." "No," he cut in softly, his eyes never leaving mine. "You didn't." Somewhere deeper in the house, I could feel movement. Shadows shifting. People I couldn't see, but knew were there. Watching. Waiting. My son shifted in my arms, his small hand reaching out without thinking, toward him. Toward the one person in this room I didn't understand. And for a split second, I saw it. The man didn't step back. He didn't pull away. He just looked down at that tiny hand, like it meant something. Then his eyes lifted back to mine. And this time, there was something else there. Something heavier. "Now you're inside," he said quietly. "That changes everything." I did not realize how quiet the house was until my own breathing sounded too loud in my ears. It was not the kind of quiet that felt peaceful. It was controlled. Intentional. Like every sound had permission to exist. My son shifted in my arms, his small body still trembling, and I tightened my hold on him without thinking. The man did not move. He simply watched, his presence filling the space in a way that made it impossible to forget he was there. "What is your name?" he asked. His tone did not change, still calm, still measured, but now it felt closer, more focused. "Emily," I said, my voice barely steady. "Emily Carter." His gaze lingered for a second longer, as if committing it to memory, then dropped briefly to my son. "And him?" "Noah," I answered quickly. "He is 5. Noah peeked up at him, his wide eyes searching, uncertain but not afraid in the way I expected. That unsettled me more than anything else. Children usually knew. They sensed things adults ignored. But Noah did not pull back. He just held on to me with one hand and kept looking at the man like he was trying to understand him. "He is tired," the man said quietly. It was not a question. "We both are," I replied before I could stop myself. For a moment, something almost human crossed his expression. Not softness, not warmth, just recognition. Then it was gone. "You will stay here tonight," he said. Again, not a suggestion, a decision. My chest tightened. "I cannot stay. I just needed a few minutes. I will leave as soon as—" "No," he interrupted, not raising his voice, but ending the conversation just the same. "You will not." The words settled heavily between us. Final. I opened my mouth to argue, but the sound of a car engine outside cut through the silence like a warning. My entire body froze. I did not need to look to know. He had found us. My grip on Noah tightened instinctively, my breath catching in my throat. The man turned his head slightly, listening. Not alarmed. Not rushed. Just aware. Then he looked back at me. You are being followed, he said simply. It was not a question. I shook my head. Too fast, too desperate. I can handle it. I just need to go out the back, or, there is no back door for you tonight, he replied. His eyes sharpened, something colder settling into them now. If you leave, they will find you within minutes. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. He stepped closer then, not enough to touch, but enough that I could feel the shift in the air around him. If you stay, he continued, his voice dropping just slightly. No one comes through my door without permission. The way he said it made something inside me pause. Not comfort. Not yet. But certainty. Outside, headlights swept briefly across the windows before disappearing again. The car was still there, waiting. I looked down at Noah. His small fingers were still curled into my shirt, his eyes now closed, exhaustion finally pulling him under despite everything. He trusted me. That was the problem. I had to choose. I looked back at the man in front of me, at the calm in his posture, at the control in his voice, at the quiet authority that filled the room. Who are you? I asked softly. He held my gaze for a long second, like he was deciding how much to say. Then, finally, he answered. Someone they will not cross. And for the first time since the night began, I believed him. I did not realize when I started holding my breath, only that I suddenly needed air. The room felt different now, heavier, like the walls themselves were. Listening. He had not moved much, but everything around him had shifted. I could feel it in the stillness, in the way the house seemed to wait for him without question. My arms ached from holding Noah, but I did not loosen my grip. Not yet. Not until I understood where I had brought us. He turned slightly, his gaze moving past me towards something I could not see. Go to the guest room, he said, his voice low but clear. It was not directed at me. A second later, I heard movement behind us. Quiet footsteps. Controlled. A man appeared at the edge of my vision, dressed the same as the others I had sensed earlier, dark suit, calm expression, eyes that missed nothing. He did not look at me directly. He looked at the man in front of me. Waiting. Second floor, he was told. Prepare it. The man nodded once and disappeared just as quickly as he had come. I swallowed hard, my heart still racing. You have people everywhere, I said before I could stop myself. It came out softer than I expected, more observation than accusation. His eyes returned to me, steady, unreadable. I have what I need, he replied. Not defensive, not proud, just certain. Noah stirred slightly in my arms, his small face pressing into my shoulder, his breathing evening out as sleep finally claimed him. I looked down at him, brushing damp hair away from his forehead, and for a moment the world narrowed to just that. Just him. Just the weight of keeping him safe. When I looked back up, the man was watching that too. Not me. Noah. Something in his expression changed again. Subtle. Almost invisible. But it was there. He trusts you, he said. I let out a quiet breath. He does not have a choice. The words slipped out before I could soften them. His gaze shifted back to mine, sharper this time, like he had heard more than I said. Children always have a choice, he replied. They just do not explain it. I did not know how to respond to that. I was not sure I wanted to. The silence stretched again, but this time it was different. Less threatening. Still tense, but steadier. Then the sound came again. A car door closing outside. Closer this time. My entire body reacted before my mind could. Catch up. I stepped back instinctively, tightening my hold on Noah, my eyes flicking toward the front of the house like I could see through the walls. He noticed. Of course he did. He stepped forward then, not fast, not aggressive, just enough to stop me from moving any further. Stay here, he said. 2 words. Firm. Controlled. I cannot. I whispered, panic creeping into my voice. If he sees, he will not, he interrupted. Not louder, just more certain. His eyes held mine, and for a moment, everything else faded. The storm, the car outside, the fear that had been chasing me for hours. It all quieted under the weight of that look. No one sees what I do not allow, he added, softer now. That was when I realized something that made my chest tighten in a completely different way. He was not trying to convince me. He already believed it. Completely. And somehow, I was starting to believe it too. He stepped back then, just enough to create space between us again. Go upstairs, he said. You and your son will be safe there. Safe. The word echoed in my mind. Unfamiliar, almost fragile. I hesitated, just for a second, my instincts pulling in two different directions. Run. Stay. Trust. Doubt. Then Noah shifted again, his small hand gripping my shirt tighter, even in sleep. That made the decision for me. I nodded once, barely noticeable, and turned toward the staircase I had not even realized was there before. But just before I took the first step, his voice stopped me. Emily. I froze, turning back slowly. He was still standing exactly where I had left him, composed, controlled, untouchable. But his eyes, they were different now. Darker. Focused. While you are here, he said quietly, no one takes anything from you. My breath caught. Because somehow, I knew he was not just talking about tonight. I did not remember walking up the stairs, only the sound of my own footsteps echoing too loudly in the silence. Each step felt like I was moving deeper into something I did not understand. The hallway upstairs was dim, lit by soft, warm lights that made everything look calm, almost safe, but I could still feel it underneath. Control. Precision. Nothing here was accidental. The door at the end of the hall was already open. Waiting. I stepped inside slowly, my grip on Noah tightening for a second before I forced myself to relax. The room was nothing like I expected. Not cold. Not intimidating. It was quiet. Clean. A large bed sat against the far wall, soft gray blankets neatly arranged, a small lamp casting a gentle glow that made the space feel human. Too normal for everything I had just walked through. I lowered Noah onto the bed carefully, brushing his hair back as he stirred slightly, his small face finally relaxing into real sleep. For a moment, I just stood there, watching him, making sure he was still breathing, still here, still safe. Safe. The word felt unfamiliar again, like something I was not supposed to trust. I moved to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see outside. The rain had slowed, but the street was still wet, reflecting the dim streetlights in long, broken lines. And then I saw it. The car, parked across the street, not moving, waiting. My stomach dropped instantly, a cold wave of fear rushing through me, so fast it made me dizzy. He had not left. He was still there. I stepped back from the window like it had burned me, my heart racing all over again. For a second, I thought about running, grabbing Noah, and finding another way out. But even as the thought crossed my mind, I remembered the door downstairs, the way it had locked, the way the man had looked at me when he said I would not leave. I turned toward the door of the room, my hand hovering near the handle, unsure if I should open it or stay exactly where I was told. Then there was a knock. Soft. Controlled. I froze. Every instinct screamed at me to stay quiet, to not answer, to not make a sound. The knock came again, just as calm, just as patient. Emily. His voice. Low. Certain. Not asking. I exhaled slowly, my hand finally moving to open the door. He stood there exactly as before, like nothing in the world could shift him out of place. But now, up here, without the distance of the hallway below, I could see more. The details I had missed. The way his eyes scanned the room in a single glance before settling back on me. The way his posture remained relaxed but ready, like he was always aware of everything around him. He is still outside, I said quietly, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. It was not a question. It was a confirmation. His expression did not change. Yes. Just that. No hesitation. No concern. I swallowed hard. Then why are you so calm? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His gaze held mine, steady, unreadable, but there was something behind it now. Something sharper. Because he is outside, he replied. And you are inside. The simplicity of it hit me harder than anything else he had said. Like it was that easy. Like the line between danger and safety was just a door. He stepped into the room then, slow, controlled, not invading, but not asking permission either. His presence filled the space instantly, changing the air again. My pulse quickened, but I did not step back this time. I just watched him, trying to understand, trying to decide if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. His eyes flicked briefly to Noah, sleeping peacefully on the bed, then back to me. You will stay here tonight, he said again, quieter this time, but no less final. I nodded before I even realized I had decided. Because outside that window, the fear was still waiting. And inside this room, it was not. I did not realize I was watching him breathe until I noticed that his rhythm never changed. calm, even, like the world outside did not exist unless he allowed it to. I stood near the door, my fingers still curled around the handle, unsure if I should close it or leave it open. He made that decision for me. He reached back, without looking, and pushed the door shut with a quiet, controlled motion. The soft click echoed through the room, and for a second, my chest tightened again. Not trapped. Not exactly. But contained. He moved further inside, his steps measured, his attention shifting briefly to the window before returning to me. You should rest, he said. It sounded simple. Reasonable. But nothing about this felt simple. I do not think I can, I admitted, my voice low, honest before I could stop it. His gaze lingered on me, like he was weighing something I could not see. Then he crossed the room toward a small table near the wall and poured a glass of water without asking. He held it out to me. I hesitated for half a second before taking it, my fingers brushing the cool surface of the glass. Thank you, I whispered, the words feeling strange in my mouth after everything. He nodded once, like gratitude was expected but not important. I took a small sip, the water grounding me just enough to steady my breathing. Why are you helping me? The question came out softer than I intended, but it filled the room all the same. He did not answer right away. Instead, his eyes shifted to Noah again, resting peacefully on the bed, completely unaware of everything that had changed tonight. Because you knocked, he said finally. I frowned slightly, confusion tightening in my chest. That is not a reason. It is enough, he replied. The certainty in his voice made it clear the conversation was not up for debate. I looked down at the glass in my hands, watching the faint tremble I could not fully control. You do not even know me, I said quietly. I know enough, he answered. My head lifted at that, my eyes meeting his again. What does that mean? For the first time since I had met him, something almost resembling a pause crossed his expression. Not hesitation, consideration. You ran, he said. But you did not run alone. His gaze moved briefly to Noah, then back to me. That tells me what I need to know. The words settled deeper than I expected. Not praise, not judgment, just observation. But it felt personal. I looked away first, my chest tightening again for a completely different reason. No one had ever said it like that before. No one had looked at me and seen that part first. The silence returned, but it no longer felt as sharp. Just present. Then, from somewhere downstairs, a faint sound carried upward. A door opening. Low voices. Controlled. My entire body tensed again, my eyes snapping back to his. He did not react the way I did. He did not turn. Did not rush. But I saw it. The shift. Subtle, but undeniable. His attention sharpened. They are still there, I said, barely above a whisper. He held my gaze for a second longer, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Yes. My grip tightened on the glass. Are they going to come inside? The question slipped out before I could stop it, fear threading through every word. He stepped closer then, not enough to overwhelm, but enough to anchor the space between us. No, he said. Simple, certain, final. I searched his face for doubt, for hesitation, for anything that suggested uncertainty. There was nothing. Just control. Just quiet authority that did not need to prove itself. How can you be so sure? I asked, my voice softer now, less panic, more disbelief. His eyes did not leave mine. Because they know whose door this is, he replied. The weight of those words settled into the room, heavy and undeniable. And for the first time, I understood something I had been too overwhelmed to see before. I had not just walked into a house. I had stepped into a line no one outside was willing to cross. I did not realize how tightly I was holding the glass until my fingers started to ache. The tension had not left my body. It had just changed shape. Quieter now. Deeper. Like something waiting beneath the surface. He noticed. Of course he did. His eyes dropped briefly to my hand, then back to my face, not asking, not commenting, just observing. I forced my grip to loosen, placing the glass carefully on the table beside me like any sudden movement might break something I could not see. You can sleep, he said again, softer this time, but no less certain. I shook my head slightly, my eyes flicking toward the window without meaning to. He is still out there. It was not fear in my voice anymore. It was fact. He followed my gaze, just for a second, then looked back at me. And he will remain there, he replied. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But belief had never kept me safe before. My arms folded instinctively, like I could hold myself together by force. People do not just wait outside all night, I said quietly. Not unless they think they are going to get what they came for. His expression did not change, but something in his posture shifted. Slight. Controlled. He is waiting for you to make a mistake, he said. The words settled heavily in my chest. Because he was right. That was exactly how it felt. Like one wrong move, and everything would fall apart. I let out a slow breath, my eyes drifting back to Noah. Still sleeping. Still unaware. I have already made one, I whispered. I knocked on your door. The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Not because they were untrue, but because I did not know how he would take them. For a second, the room went completely still. Then he stepped closer again. Not fast. Not threatening. Just deliberate. No, he said quietly. I looked up at him, confused by the calm certainty in his voice. That was the only decision you made tonight that was not a mistake. My breath caught. I searched his face, waiting for sarcasm, for dismissal, for anything that would make sense of that statement. There was none. Just that same controlled presence, steady and unshaken. You could have kept running, he continued. You could have chosen another door, another street, another chance. His eyes held mine, unwavering. You did not. Something in my chest tightened again, but it was not fear this time. It was something unfamiliar, something I did not have a name for yet. I looked away first, my thoughts suddenly too loud, too tangled. I did not have a choice, I said softer now. He did not answer immediately. The silence stretched, but it did not feel empty. It felt intentional, like he was deciding how much to say. There is always a choice, he said finally. Some are just harder to see. I let out a quiet breath, shaking my head slightly, not because I disagreed, but because I did not know how to respond. My entire world had narrowed to survival for so long that the idea of choice felt almost abstract. Another sound drifted up from downstairs. A door closing this time, followed by footsteps. Measured. Controlled. I tensed again, my body reacting before my mind could catch up. He noticed that too. He always noticed. But instead of turning toward the sound, he stepped slightly to the side, positioning himself between me and the door without making it obvious. It was subtle, almost invisible, but I felt it. The shift. The protection. You are safe here, he said again, quieter now. Not trying to convince me. Just stating it like a fact that did not need proof. I looked at him, really looked this time. At the way he stood. At the calm in his breathing. At the complete absence of doubt in his eyes. And for the first time since I had stepped inside this house, I felt my shoulders drop just a little. Just enough to breathe. Just enough to stop bracing for the next moment. But even then, something lingered in the back of my mind. A question I could not ignore. What happens tomorrow? I asked softly. Because tonight, I might be safe. But tomorrow was still waiting. His gaze held mine for a long second. Then he answered. That depends, he said quietly, on whether you choose to leave or stay. Stay. The word left my lips before I could stop it, quieter than I expected, like I was afraid of hearing it out loud. My eyes stayed on him, searching for something I could hold on to, something clear, something simple. But there was nothing simple about him. Not the way he stood, not the way he looked at me, not the way every word he spoke seemed to settle deeper than it should. He did not rush to answer. He never rushed. Yes, he said finally. Just one word. Calm. Certain. Like the option had always been there, waiting for me to notice it. My chest tightened again, but this time it was not fear pushing in. It was something heavier. Something that felt dangerously close to relief. I shook my head slightly, trying to push it away. You do not even know what you are asking, I said. My voice was steadier now, but there was still something fragile underneath it. You are right, he replied. I do not. That should have ended the conversation. It should have made it easier to dismiss him, to hold on to the idea that this was temporary, that I would leave as soon as the sun came up. But he did not stop there. But I know what is waiting for you outside, he continued, his eyes locking onto mine. And I know what happens if you go back to it. My breath caught, my fingers curling slightly at my sides. He was not guessing. He was not assuming. He was seeing more than I had said out loud. I looked away first, my gaze drifting back to Noah. He had shifted slightly in his sleep, his small hand now resting open on the blanket, like he had finally let go of something. That sight alone made my chest ache in a way I could not explain. I cannot stay here, I whispered, but the words lacked conviction this time. He noticed that too. Of course he did. You can't, he said simply. You are choosing not to. I let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. You make it sound easy. His expression did not change. It is not easy, he replied. It is necessary. The way he said it made something inside me pause again. Necessary. Not for him. For me. That was the difference. That was what made it harder to ignore. I turned back to him slowly, my eyes narrowing just slightly. And what do you get out of it? I asked. Because there had to be something. There was always something. People did not offer protection without expecting something in return. Not in my world. Not in any world I had ever known. For the first time, he did not answer immediately. His gaze held mine, steady, but there was something else there now. Something quieter. Something I could not read. I do not need anything from you, he said finally. The words should have felt reassuring. They should have eased something in me. But instead, they unsettled me even more. Because I did not understand them. That does not make sense, I said softly. It does not have to, he replied. The room fell silent again, but this time it felt different. Not tense. Not heavy. Just waiting. Like something had shifted, and neither of us was quite sure what it meant yet. I took a slow breath, my shoulders rising and falling as I tried to steady myself. If I stay, I began, my voice quieter now, more careful. This is not just for tonight. His eyes sharpened slightly, like that was exactly the point he had been waiting for me to reach. No, he said. It is not. The weight of that settled between us, undeniable and real. I looked at Noah again, then back at him, my heart beating slower now, but deeper, more aware, more present. And if I leave? I asked. I needed to hear it. Needed to understand both sides of the choice. He did not hesitate this time. Then I will open that door, he said. His voice was calm, controlled, but there was something colder underneath it now. And everything waiting outside will still be there. The simplicity of it hit harder than anything else. No threats. No pressure. Just truth. I stood there for a long moment, the silence stretching between us as my mind tried to catch up with what my instincts were already telling me. This was not just about safety. This was about a line. A line I had already crossed the moment I knocked. And now, there was no going back to the version of my life that existed before it. I did not realize how quiet the room had become until I noticed that even the sound of the rain had faded into the background. Everything felt suspended, like the moment was waiting for me to decide what came next. My eyes drifted back to Noah, still sleeping, his small chest rising and falling in a rhythm that finally felt steady. For the first time in hours, he looked like a child again. Not afraid. Not running. Just safe. That word stayed in my mind longer than it should have. I turned back to him slowly, my fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the bed as if I needed something solid to hold on to. He had not moved. He was still watching me, still patient, still completely in control of the space between us. If I stay, I said quietly, my voice more certain now, it is not just about tonight. He did not interrupt. He did not rush me. He just listened. It changes everything. I continued, my eyes meeting his. For me. For him. I nodded slightly toward Noah. His gaze followed for a second, then returned to mine. Yes, he said simply. No hesitation. No attempt to soften it. Just truth. My chest tightened, but I did not look away this time. And you are fine with that? I asked, taking on something you did not ask for. The question lingered in the air, heavier than I intended, but I needed to understand. Needed to know if this was real or just another illusion of safety that would disappear when it mattered most. He stepped closer again, stopping just short of where the distance would feel uncomfortable. Close enough that I could see the slight shift in his eyes, the way something behind them moved, not softer, but more deliberate. I decide what I take on, he said quietly. Nothing comes into my world by accident. The words settled into me slowly, like they carried more meaning than I could fully grasp yet. I swallowed, my thoughts catching on that one sentence. Because if that was true, then he had already made his choice. And now, I had to make mine. I looked down at my hands for a moment, noticing they were no longer shaking. That alone felt like something I had not experienced in a long time. My breath came easier now, steadier, like the panic had finally loosened its grip just enough for me to think clearly. If I stay, I said again, softer this time, more to myself than to him. I am stepping into something I do not understand. Yes, he replied. No hesitation. No denial. Just acceptance. I let out a slow breath, my eyes lifting back to his. And I cannot just walk away from that later. He held my gaze, unwavering. No, he said. The finality in that single word echoed louder than anything else he had said tonight. I nodded once, small but certain, the weight of the decision settling into place. Not light, not easy, but clear. I turned slightly, adjusting the blanket over Noah, my fingers lingering for a second as I brushed his hair back again. He did not wake. He trusted me to make the right choice. That was what mattered. That was what everything came down to. I straightened slowly, turning back to face him fully this time. There was no hesitation left in my voice when I spoke. Then I stay. The words hung in the air, simple but irreversible. He did not smile. He did not react the way most people would. But something shifted. Subtle. Controlled. Like a decision had just been confirmed. He inclined his head slightly, acknowledging it, accepting it without question. Then you are under my protection, he said quietly. The same words he had used before. But this time they felt different. This time, they felt like a promise. And as I stood there, in a house I had never meant to enter, in front of a man I did not fully understand, I realized something that made my breath catch just slightly. I had not just chosen to stay. I had chosen him. I did not expect the room to feel different after I said it, but it did. Not louder, not brighter, just settled, like something that had been waiting finally had its answer. He did not move right away. He did not need to. His presence alone seemed to shift the air, turning something uncertain into something defined. I stood there for a second longer, letting the weight of my own decision sink in. There was no taking it back now. Not really. I had stepped into his world, and something told me there were no half measures here. My eyes drifted to Noah again, still asleep, his face calm in a way I had not seen in weeks. That alone steadied me. If this was the cost of that peace, then I would carry it. Then it is decided, he said quietly. Not a question, not even a confirmation, just a statement of fact. I nodded once, slower this time, more grounded. Yes. The word felt heavier now, but also clearer. He watched me for another moment, like he was measuring something I could not see. Then he turned slightly toward the door. You will remain in this room tonight, he continued. No one will enter without my permission. There was no need to ask who no one meant. I already knew. I let out a small breath, my shoulders easing just a fraction. And you? I asked before I could stop myself. The question slipped out softer than I intended, but it stayed there between us all the same. He paused, his hand resting lightly against the door, not opening it yet. I will be where I am needed, he replied. The answer was simple, but it did not feel distant. If anything, it felt closer, more present. Like wherever he went, this decision followed. I hesitated, my fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the bed again. You are not worried? I asked. About him being outside? He turned his head just slightly, enough for his eyes to meet mine again. No, he said. The certainty in that one word did more than any explanation could have. I believed him. That was what unsettled me the most. Not the house, not the silence, not even the man waiting outside. It was the fact that I believed this stranger without hesitation. He opened the door then, but before stepping out, he stopped. Just for a second. Emily, he said, my name quieter now, but somehow more deliberate. I looked up at him, my breath catching slightly at the way he said it. You chose to stay, he continued. That means something. I frowned slightly, confusion flickering through me. What does it mean? I asked. He held my gaze for a long moment, like he was deciding how much to reveal. Then, finally, he answered. It means you are no longer outside of this, he said. The words settled into my chest, heavier than anything else he had said tonight. Because I understood them. Maybe not completely, but enough. This was not just protection. This was involvement. He stepped out after that, closing the door behind him with the same quiet precision as before. The click echoed again, but this time it did not feel like a barrier. It felt like a line drawn. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the door, my thoughts moving slower now, deeper. Then I turned back to Noah, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed beside him. My hand found his small one again, holding it gently, grounding myself in something real. The room was quiet, safe, but my mind was not. Because now, for the first time since I started running, I was not just thinking about surviving the night. I was thinking about what came after. And somewhere deep down, a question began to take shape, one I could not ignore no matter how much I tried. If I had just stepped into his world, what would he ask for in return when it was time to collect? I did not remember falling asleep. One moment I was sitting on the edge of the bed, my fingers wrapped around Noah's hand, listening to the silence of the house. The next, I was opening my eyes to something unfamiliar. Stillness. Not the tense kind I had grown used to, where every sound made my body react before my mind could catch up. This was different. Softer. Controlled. Safe. The realization hit me slowly, like my body did not quite trust it yet. I turned my head slightly, my eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through the curtains. Morning. The storm had passed. The room looked the same, but everything felt clearer. Noah was still beside me, curled slightly under the blanket, his face relaxed, his breathing steady. For a second, I just watched him, making sure it was real, that nothing had followed us into this space, that he was still untouched by everything outside. My chest tightened, but this time it was not fear. It was something closer to relief. I exhaled slowly, my hand brushing lightly through his hair before I carefully slipped out of bed. My body felt heavier than usual, like it was catching up with everything I had pushed aside the night before. Every step toward the window felt deliberate. I reached for the curtain and pulled it back just enough to see the street. The car was gone. Just empty pavement reflecting the pale morning light. No movement. No waiting. No shadow of what had been there hours before. My breath caught for a second, not because I was afraid, but because I was not. That was what felt strange. The fear that had been driving me forward, pushing me to run, to hide, to survive, it was quieter now. Not gone, but no longer in control. I stepped back from the window slowly, my mind trying to adjust to the shift. He had said it would be like this, that nothing would cross that line. And he had been right. Again, a soft knock at the door pulled my attention back instantly. My body reacted out of instinct, tensing for just a fraction of a second before I recognized the difference. This was not urgent, not threatening, just expected. Emily. His voice came through the door, calm as it had been the night before. I moved toward it, my hand resting briefly against the handle before opening it. He stood there, exactly as I remembered. Composed. Controlled. Like the night had not touched him at all. But in the daylight, I could see more. The details I had missed before. The precision in everything about him. The quiet authority that did not fade with the morning. His eyes met mine. Immediately, scanning, assessing, but not intrusive. Just aware. You should eat, he said. It sounded simple. Normal. Almost out of place after everything that had happened. I blinked slightly, caught off guard by the ordinary nature of it. I am fine. I replied automatically, the habit of saying it slipping out before I could stop it. His gaze held mine for a second longer, like he did not believe that answer. Then he nodded once, not arguing, not pushing. Your son will wake soon, he added. My eyes flicked back toward Noah instinctively, and he was right. There was a slight shift in the way Noah moved under the blanket, the small signs of waking that only came when he felt safe enough to let go of sleep. I looked back at him, something unspoken settling between us. He will not remember last night the way you do, he said quietly. The words caught me off guard, my chest tightening slightly. Children hold on to different things, he continued. What he remembers will depend on what comes next. I swallowed, the weight of that settling deeper than I expected. Because he was right. Again, this was not just about what had happened. It was about what I chose to make of it. I looked at him, really looked this time, in the light, without the chaos of the night pressing in around us. And what comes next? I asked softly. He did not hesitate. That depends, he said, his voice steady, certain, on how long you intend to stay. I did not answer him right away. The question stayed there, suspended between us, heavier than it sounded. How long would I stay? Not if, not should. How long? Like the decision had already been made, and all that remained was defining its weight. My fingers tightened slightly against the doorframe, grounding myself before I spoke. Long enough? I said quietly. It was not a number, not a promise, but it was the truth I could offer. His eyes held mine for a moment, steady, measuring, like he understood exactly what I meant without needing more. Then he nodded once. Then we begin with that, he said. Something about the way he said begin made my chest tighten again. Not fear. Not entirely. Just the awareness that this was no longer temporary. That whatever this was, it had already started. A small sound behind me pulled my attention away. Noah. I turned instinctively, my body reacting before my thoughts could catch up. He shifted under the blanket, his eyes fluttering open slowly, confusion flickering across his face before settling on something softer. Recognition. Mom. His voice was rough with sleep, small and uncertain, but not afraid. Not the way it had been the night before. I moved to him immediately, sitting on the edge of the bed, my hand finding his without hesitation. I am right here, I said softly. He blinked up at me, then glanced around the room, taking in the unfamiliar space with the kind of quiet curiosity only children seem to have. Where are we? He asked. I hesitated for half a second, my eyes flicking briefly toward the door where the man still stood, watching without intruding. Somewhere safe, I answered finally. Noah studied my face for a moment, like he was deciding whether to believe me. Then he nodded, simple and accepting, like that was enough. Because for him it was. His gaze shifted then, landing on the man in the doorway. There was no fear in his expression, just curiosity. Who is he? Noah asked, his voice quieter now, but steady. I felt the weight of that question immediately. Not because I did not have an answer, but because I did not know how to explain it in a way that made sense. I turned my head slightly, meeting the man's eyes again. He did not step forward, did not speak. He just waited, letting me decide. He is helping us, I said carefully. Noah looked back at him, tilting his head just slightly, like he was trying to understand something beyond words. Then, without hesitation, he gave a small nod. Okay, that was it. No questions, no fear, just acceptance. I stared at him for a second, caught off guard by how easily he let it settle, how quickly he trusted what I had not fully figured out myself. When I looked back at the man, something in his expression had shifted again. Subtle, almost invisible, but there. He inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the moment in a way that felt more significant than it should have. There is food. Downstairs, he said, his voice returning to that calm, controlled tone. You should both eat. Noah perked up slightly at that, his small hand tightening around mine. I am hungry, he admitted quietly, like it was something he had been holding back. I let out a soft breath, a faint smile touching my lips before I could stop it. I know, I said gently. I helped him sit up, adjusting the blanket around him before standing again. For a moment, I hesitated, my eyes drifting back to the room, to the bed, to the quiet safety it had offered through the night. Then I looked at him again, at the man who had drawn this line between danger and protection and made it real. What happens now? I asked softly. He held my gaze, steady and certain, like the answer had been waiting all along. Now, he said, you learn how to live inside this. And something about the way he said it made me realize survival was no longer the only thing I had to figure out. I did not expect something as simple as walking downstairs to feel like crossing into a different world, but it did. Every step felt deliberate, like I was becoming more aware of where I was with each inch forward. Noah's hand stayed firmly in mine, small and warm, grounding me in a way nothing else could. He walked quietly beside me, his eyes taking in everything without fear, only curiosity. That alone kept me steady. The house did not feel loud or chaotic the way I imagined it would. It was quiet, ordered, every detail in place like it belonged there for a reason. We reached the bottom of the stairs, and for a brief second, I hesitated. Not because I wanted to turn back, but because I realized there was no version of my life where this moment existed before now. He noticed. Of course he did. He was already standing a few steps ahead, waiting, not rushing, not pulling me forward, just allowing me to decide to continue. So I did. The kitchen opened up in front of us, wide and filled with soft morning light that reflected off polished surfaces and clean lines. It did not feel cold. It felt controlled, like everything else here. A plate was already set on the counter. Simple food. Toast, eggs, fresh fruit. Enough for both of us. I paused again, my eyes moving from the table to him. You planned this, I said quietly. It was not a question. He met my gaze, calm as ever. I prepare for what I allow into my home, he replied. The words settled into me slowly, layering over everything he had already said. Nothing here was accidental. Not even us. Noah squeezed my hand lightly, pulling my attention back down to him. Can we eat? He asked, his voice soft but hopeful. I let out a small breath, nodding gently. Yes, we can. We moved to the table, and I helped him into the chair before sitting beside him. For a moment, it felt almost normal. Too normal. That was what made it strange. Noah reached for a piece of fruit, biting into it without hesitation, like the world had already shifted into something safer in his mind. I watched him for a second, then picked up my fork, forcing myself to follow through. The food tasted real, warm, grounding. It pulled me further into the present, away from the constant edge I had been living on. Across from us, he remained standing, not eating, just watching in that quiet, observant way that never felt intrusive but never missed anything either. "You are not eating," I said after a moment, my voice softer now. He shook his head slightly. "I already have." I frowned faintly, not fully convinced, but I did not press. There were too many things I did not understand yet. Silence settled over the table, but it was not uncomfortable. Just different. Noah looked up suddenly, his eyes bright with a question he had not asked yet. "Is this your house?" he said, looking directly at him. The directness caught me off guard, but not him. He stepped a little closer, not enough to overwhelm, just enough to be part of the moment. "Yes," he answered simply. Noah nodded, like that explained everything. Then he glanced around again, his small voice thoughtful. "It is really big." I could not help the faint smile that touched my lips at that. For a moment, the weight of everything lifted just enough to let something lighter through. When I looked back up, his eyes were on me again. Not questioning, not pushing, just there. "You will need time," he said, quietly, "to adjust." I nodded slowly, my fingers resting lightly against the edge of the table. "I know." And for the first time, I meant it in a different way. Not just surviving, not just reacting. Adjusting meant something else, something deeper. Noah finished his food quickly, sliding down from the chair and moving closer to me again, his small hand finding mine without thinking. I held it automatically, the connection steady and familiar. But as I sat there, in a place that should not have felt safe, but somehow did, I realized something that made my chest tighten just slightly. I was no longer waiting to leave. I was waiting to understand what staying really meant. I did not expect the silence to feel this steady. Not after everything that had led us here. Not after the fear that had been chasing me for so long it had started to feel like part of who I was. But as I sat there, Noah's hand still wrapped around mine, the house around us calm and unmoving, something inside me shifted in a way I could not ignore anymore. It was not just relief. It was something deeper, something that felt dangerously close to trust. I glanced up at him again, watching the way he stood, still composed, still entirely in control of everything around him. Nothing about him had softened. Nothing about this place had changed. And yet, everything felt different now. "You are thinking," he said quietly, his voice cutting through my thoughts without force, just presence. I exhaled slowly, not denying it. "I am trying to understand," I admitted. He inclined his head slightly, like that answer made sense. "Understanding takes time," he replied. "But you are no longer in a position where time is working against you." The words settled into me, heavy but not overwhelming. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was not counting seconds, not measuring distance to the nearest exit, not calculating how fast I could run if I had to. That alone changed everything. Noah shifted beside me, leaning lightly into my side, his small voice breaking the quiet again. "Are we staying here?" he asked. The question was simple, honest, and it carried more weight than anything else in the room. I looked down at him, my fingers brushing through his hair slowly, grounding myself in that small, steady moment. Then I looked back up at the man across from us. He did not answer for me. He did not step in. He simply watched, giving me the space to choose my words. That mattered more than I expected. "For now," I said gently, my voice calm but certain. Noah nodded, like that was enough. Like it always had been. He did not need guarantees. He needed stability. And somehow, this place was already giving him that. I stood slowly, my body feeling lighter than it had the night before, even if my thoughts were still catching up. "I do not know what this becomes," I said, my eyes meeting his again, "or what it asks of me." He stepped forward just slightly, not closing the distance completely, but enough to make the moment feel more defined. "You will learn," he said. Not reassuring, not dismissive, just true. I held his gaze, searching for something I could name, something I could anchor myself to. What I found instead was something quieter, something steadier. Certainty, not about me, not about us, but about the world he had built and the place he was offering within it. "And if I decide this is not where I belong?" I asked softly. It was the last question I needed to ask, The last line I needed to see clearly. He did not look away, did not hesitate. Then you will leave, he said. Simple, direct. But there was something else beneath it now. Something that had not been there before. But you will not leave the same as you arrived. The words settled into the space between us, quiet but undeniable. I understood them. Maybe not completely, but enough. Because he was right. I had already changed the moment I knocked on that door. I looked down at Noah again, then back at him, my breath steady, my thoughts clearer than they had been since this began. This was not just about escape anymore. It was about what came after. And for the first time, I was not afraid of that answer. Because somewhere between the fear and the silence and the choices I never expected to make, I had stepped into something I could not walk away from. Not because I was trapped, but because part of me no longer wanted to leave.